Today's webinar topic is aimed towards anybody who has recently implemented PDM, or for any reason at all you have an empty PDM vault. And I'm basically going to focus on what to do with the empty vault. How do you get started? So my topic today is new PDM vault, what now? So let's assume that you've gone through a typical PDM implementation. And when I say typical, this is how I would break down a typical PDM implementation. You can usually break it down into 4 major steps. So you would start off by installing software. That would be on the server and on your client PCs, and of course, hopefully those will talk to each other. You would configure the PDM system to suit your needs. You would go through some training, usually for the administrators and the end users, so you know how to use the system. And then you would simply go live, which means allowing people to get into the vault and start using it, storing files, accessing data, and so on. Now, the first thing we need to determine with a new PDM vault is what's going to be in it. So when you go live, what do the users see immediately when they log in? You may have 2 types of data that you want to consider putting into your new PDM vault. You're going to have your shared assets and you're going to have your legacy engineering data. For the legacy engineering data, I'll cover that in just a moment, but let's first talk about the shared assets. And what I mean by shared assets is things like your templates, your toolboxes, your design libraries. You may have some more shared assets in your organization, but these things are needed in the PDM vault because one of the many benefits of PDM is having a single source of truth. And these are perfect examples of assets that you would want to be shared across your organization. For example, you wouldn't want one user making a drawing in a differently formatted drawing template from other users in your organization. So for that reason, we want all of these assets in one place, and we want everybody using these assets from this single source. With the shared assets in place, you'd then turn your focus to the legacy engineering data. This is the data that you've built up prior to having PDM. And now that you've got PDM, you must decide, well, what do we do with this data? And questions come up like, do you want all of your data moved into PDM? Or just some of it? Or maybe none of it? So let me mention a couple of approaches that I've seen in the past, and hopefully that will help you answer those types of questions. So I've seen customers where they need everything. All legacy data, all versions, all files. So there needs to be some kind of mass migration or bulk migration, as we call it. I've seen other customers that want some of the legacy data, maybe like the past couple of years, but not all of it. There might be some data in there that they don't necessarily need. Then I have other customers that want to use the opportunity to simply draw a line in the sand and start PDM with clean data. Legacy data may be locked and still stored in its old location, but only accessed when needed and maybe just brought over into PDM as and when it's needed. Of course, with all of this, you have to consider the cost of migrating your data into the PDM vault. There could be a monetary cost if you're paying somebody, a third party, to do a migration for you. But then even if you don't do that, there's also the cost in time to yourself. If you do it yourself and you move the data, how long is it going to take you to get it moved over? If there's any cleanup to do, of course, you have to consider that may take you some time as well. So obviously there's a cost involved there as well. So we see a little bit of everything. There's definitely no one-size-fits-all approach to migrating your data into a new PDM vault. Okay, so now that we know what we need in PDM, or what we should have in PDM, let's go take a look at what a typical vault would look like after we'd been through this process. So back on my C drive, I have my PDM vault. And like I say, this is one that I've set up for us. So this is kind of what you would expect to see when you're ready to go live and you've got the data in there that we just spoke about. It's the data that we need, such as our shared assets and our legacy data. So as far as shared assets, we talked about putting the templates in there. So we'd simply copy the templates in, they'd be in the PDM vault. Same thing with the design library. and the toolbox. So we'd simply copy all those into the PDM vault, check them in, and then we'd point our client PCs to that location for our files. Now you will have also legacy engineering data. So in this example here, I've got a projects folder, and I've just brought a couple of projects in just to show you kind of how it would look. So the folder structure itself, it's usually configured to suit your needs. So you would set the folder structure up, and then you'd simply have your files within that folder structure. So when you're ready to go live, this is typically what you would expect to see. What I'll do next is I'll go through this process again of adding this data to PDM so you can see the process from start to finish. So I'm just going to remove everything we've got in there. Now I had quite a lot of data, so the delete operation will take some time. So we'll just let that finish up. And then we'll confirm the delete in the delete window. Okay, so now we're back to a nice, clean, empty vault. We want to go ahead and start adding that data in again. So first of all, I'm going to show you an example of how to get the shared assets into the PDM vault. That's going to be your templates, your toolbox, and the design library. First step is we need to go and find out where they are. So the trick there is to just simply open up SOLIDWORKS, and then you can go to Tools, Options. In Tools Options, come down the left-hand side, and let's start by going to File Locations. Okay, in File Locations, it tells us where our current templates are coming from. If we hit the drop-down, we can switch it over to the Design Library, and we can see where the Design Library is currently stored as well. And then finally, if we come a little bit further down the left-hand side, we can see the whole wizard toolbox, and it shows us where it's currently pointing to. So we can use this to go and get the toolbox, and to go and get the design library and the document templates, so we know exactly where to go to put them into the PDM vault. I'm just going to cancel that for the moment and go back to Windows Explorer. I'm going to tile a new window here so you can kind of see what I'm doing in the background. So we'll go through the path that it showed us, program data, SOLIDWORKS, the version that you've got installed. There's the design library, and there's the templates. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a Windows operation, so copy, paste, drag and drop. Both of those basically do the same thing. Okay, and then once that's finished up, let's do the same thing for the toolbox. So if you remember, that was on the C drive, and it was just called SOLIDWORKS data. So drag and drop was the one I did the first time. This time I'll just do copy paste, just show that they're both doing the same thing. Then once that's complete, I've got all of the shared assets that I wanted to bring into the PDM vault. So the next step is to simply take all of those and go ahead and check them in. And I do want to just quickly point out that the toolbox, the design library, the templates, these can be rather large. So what you're seeing on my screen right now is very quick. This operation seems to be very quick. What you'll see when you do this on your system could take much, much longer based on the size and the amount of data that you have in these locations. Okay, so now that we've got all of those checked into the PDM vault, we have all of our shared assets in a central location. The next step for us is to make sure that our toolbox is configured and that SOLIDWORKS knows that the toolbox is in the PDM vault. And also we need to change our client PCs so that they know where to go to get the templates and the design libraries. So let's start with the toolbox. I'm going to first of all go into the administration tool. And if you'll notice down the left-hand side of the administration tool, there's a SOLIDWORKS node. Below that, there is a toolbox node. Now you want to open this up and you want to tell it that you're managing the SOLIDWORKS toolbox in the PDM vault. You've got a root folder path here. Mine defaulted to the correct place. If yours doesn't, you can just hit the browse button here and go and point it to your toolbox that's within the PDM system now. There's a couple of other options here for the permissions and allowing the clients to do certain things. You can always click on the help files if you need more information about those. All right, I'm going to click OK. PDM system now knows that the toolbox is in the vault. The next step is, on every client machine, we need to open up SOLIDWORKS. And we need to go to the system options again. And we need to tell the client PCs where to go now. So I'll start off with the toolbox, seeing as we were working on that one. Okay, and you can see it's pointing to my C drive. I just want to change that over now. So instead of the C drive, I'm telling it to go to my PDM vault and to use the SOLIDWORKS data folder in that location instead. While I'm in here, I'm going to go to the file locations. My document templates I need to change, so I'm going to simply delete the path that's there. And again, we'll click on Add and point back to our PDM vault. I'll do the same for the design library. I'll remove the old one. And by the way, you can have more than one design library. For simplicity, I'm just going to demonstrate having one design library centrally located in PDM. Okay, and then your default templates. Now that we've moved the templates into PDM, you just want to go and update these. So click on the default templates, and all you need to do here is simply hit the button on the right-hand side, and then simply point to the template location, which will now be pointing to the PDM vault. So pick the default templates of choice, and that'll just update all of those for you. Once you click OK, now your SOLIDWORKS system is set to point to that central location for all of your shared assets. There is one more thing that you must do, and that is to make sure that all of those shared assets are cached locally to your PC. As you saw when we were setting up the file paths, we were pointing to this location on our C drive. Now, to make sure that all of these are cached locally on the PC, you can simply select all of them. You can do it all at once if you want. And then there's a Get Latest Version button here in the PDM window. Now, you're going to want to do this on all of your client PCs that are using PDM and SOLIDWORKS. That will cache all of these files locally, and that means that when they open up SOLIDWORKS, it's not missing anything. There is another option you can do to make sure that this is done automatically, and that's back in the PDM administration tool. So this is a setting. Now, I would recommend doing this setting at a group level. I'll use the engineers as an example here. So I'm going to open up the engineers group, and you can see on the left-hand side, there's a cache options. I'm going to select that. And then for each of these, I'm going to check the box that says refresh cache during login. So what that means is that every time a user from the engineers group logs in, it goes out and it refreshes the local cache for these folders. And that means that all of the templates, the design library, and the toolbox SOLIDWORKS data, it means they all now reside in the user's C drive local cache. As we now have all our shared assets stored in PDM, cached locally, and all our SOLIDWORKS clients are pointing to the right location, we'll turn our attention now to the legacy engineering data. I mentioned earlier that there are some decisions to be made around what data comes into PDM, and hopefully by now you've had a little bit of time to think about that, and you've come to a conclusion on what you want in your PDM system. What I'll do next is go through some examples of moving legacy engineering data into PDM. I'll show you a couple of methods, and I'll show you a couple of tools that will assist you in this process. So we'll start off back in the PDM vault, and I'm going to tile my window here. And just, by the way, I am using the training files from the Administering SOLIDWORKS PDM Professional training class. And I'm using these as examples so you can kind of get an idea of how to move the data. Now, the first example I'm going to show you here is what we would consider a bulk migration. And this is from a Windows location. And this is something that we see quite common. There is a folder on a network share. Typically, it's called engineering. And everything just is in that folder. So all our assemblies, all our models, all our drawings. There may be other documentation as well, such as PDFs, spec sheets, material databases. But a common scenario is it all resides in this one location. And we just simply want to move that one location now to the PDM vault. So the method is just like what you saw when we moved the templates, the design library and toolbox. It's a Windows operation of copy, paste, drag and drop. Now, my example file here is not huge. When you do this back in your environment, I'm going to assume that your engineering folder has a lot more data, so the copy process can take a very long time. Once it's copied into the PDM vault, you would go through the check-in process. And just like the copy operation, because your data is much larger than mine, this check-in process can take a while as well. But once those two steps are complete, copy, paste, check in, your data now resides in the PDM vault. And this is where you would go now to access your models, your drawings, and any other documentation related to the engineering. That method works well if the data on your network share, or in its current location, wherever that may be, if the data is clean and tidy. What I mean by that is you don't have duplicate files, references are not missing, the folder structure is exactly as you need it. So there's not a lot of cleanup to do. If that's the case, then using this method works perfectly. If, however, you're like a lot of organizations, and by using a Windows network drive, people have had the freedom to rename files, break references, move files to different folders, duplicate files, then your data may not be clean enough to bring into PDM. You have a choice to make whether to clean up the data and then bring it in, or just selectively bring in the files that you know are in good shape. Now, the tools that I'm going to show you for that is, first of all, the Pack and Go tool. You may be familiar with this. It's been around in the SOLIDWORKS environment for a long time. This can be found in the right mouse menu. You can simply right-click on an assembly or a drawing, and there's a Pack and Go option in the right mouse menu. A way to guarantee that everything is good in that assembly before you run the Pack and Go is to simply open it in SOLIDWORKS. From here, you can just do a file open. In the SOLIDWORKS file open, you can use the filter, and you can filter out to assemblies or top-level assemblies. And then you can simply select the assembly or the drawing at top level, and then just simply open it. When the file's open in SOLIDWORKS, you can find Pack and Go in the File menu. This will gather all of the references, and then all you need to do is simply browse to the folder location that you want to move the file to. So in this case here, we'll go to our PDM vault. I'm going to add a new folder. And then select that folder to place the files into. And then just simply hit save. We'll close it up in SOLIDWORKS, and then let's go and validate that everything looks good in PDM. So moving back into the PDM vault, we'll go into the grill assembly, and you can see it's brought the assembly over and all of its references. Now it's left them in the checked out state, so we do still have to check the assembly in. But prior to doing that, I want to show you one more tool that will just validate that we've got everything that we need. We're not missing any references, and files are not pointing outside of the PDM vault. So this next step is to select the assembly, and then in the Tools menu in SOLIDWORKS PDM, there's a tool called Update References. If you run this on your top-level files, it'll build the reference tree. And what you want to look for in here is you just want to confirm that everything is pointing inside the vault and not in a location outside of PDM. If it is, you can simply select the component, and there are some tools. If you think the file is in a different place in the vault, you can go ahead and search the vault for it. You can replace the file with another file, or you can simply add the file to the vault, and it will go and get it from wherever it's pointing to. Just remember the update references tool if you need to validate. But like I said, once you get the assembly over there in the vault, the next step is to check in. And once it's checked in, it now resides in PDM. Okay, so to summarize what we've seen in today's presentation, we've looked at how to move data into PDM when you've got a new or empty PDM vault. We have seen how we would move shared assets and legacy data. We've looked at a couple of tools that will assist us in this process. And I've also given you some things to think about in regards to what you bring into the PDM vault.